Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to a new episode of our Letter to Vox podcast.
Today, we are really embarking on a major deep dive. We're tackling a text that feels, more relevant by the day in our hyper-accelerated, tech-driven world.
We're looking at Hannah Arendt's monumental work of political philosophy, The Human Condition.
Which she published back in 1958, right on the cusp of the space age. And, it's an incredibly ambitious project. It's dense. It pulls from centuries of Western thought.
But its core purpose is surprisingly immediate. It's actually quite personal. Arendt herself states her mission right at the beginning. She says the book is, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's nothing more than an attempt to think what we are doing.
And that phrase,
Yeah.
that's everything. That is the intellectual engine driving this entire book. To really get why she felt this was so urgent, you need a little context.
Right. Who is Hannah Arendt?
Well, she was a German-Jewish political theorist. She had to flee Nazism, and her earlier absolutely foundational work was all about diagnosing the mechanisms of totalitarianism.
So the human condition doesn't come out of nowhere?
Not at all. It's organically linked to that earlier work. It's her next step, you could say. It's her offering this original, really profound diagnosis of the entire modern human predicament. And she traces it all back to this core idea she calls alienation from the world.
So it's not just a critique of capitalism or communism. It's something deeper.
Much deeper. It's a philosophical dive into how our relationship with the planet, with each other, and with the very things we create has fundamentally shifted, really since the ancient Greeks first defined what political life even was.
And her argument is that we can't solve our modern problems until we really re-examine the words, the very categories we use to describe our own lives.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, our mission is to follow her path. We'll start by looking at the technological and psychological shock that kind of kicked off her whole project.
Then we're going to spend a good amount of time unpacking her crucial framework, the vita activa. This is her separating human activity into three distinct things.
Labor, work, and action. Three things that she argues we constantly confuse.
And finally, we have to tackle her really radical critique of modernity, which is all centered on what she calls the terrifying rise of the social and how it blurs the line between our political and our private lives.
Okay, let's dig into that starting point because it's pretty stunning. Arendt begins the book by pinpointing two events that she says mark the end of one age and the beginning of a new, completely unknown one.
Right. She points to the splitting of the atom, which gave humanity this almost godlike power to destroy the world. And then, crucially, the launch of Sputnik in 1957.
The first man-made Earth-borne object to leave the atmosphere and orbit the universe.
And the technology itself was, of course, staggering. It was this incredible demonstration of human ingenuity. But Arendt, she zeroes in on the emotional reaction, the collective human response to Sputnik.
And what was that reaction? Why did it disturb her so much?
Because the reaction, as she saw it reported everywhere, wasn't just triumph or awe at her own power. It was, and this is the key word, relief.
Relief. A sense of relief. As she puts it, a first step toward escape from men's imprisonment to the earth. And for Arendt, this was a profoundly disturbing thing to hear.
You have to think about the historical weight of that feeling. I mean, for centuries, philosophers and theologians have looked at the earth as a problem.
Sure, Christians called it a vale of tears. And for philosophers, the body was a prison of the mind. The desire to escape was always there, but it was a spiritual desire, a metaphysical one.
And then suddenly, in 1957, it becomes a technical possibility. And there's this mass, almost tangible desire to actually do it, to leave.
It implies this deep, deep-seated rejection of our given home. It's an act of what she calls earth alienation. She's really challenging us to think about what it means when humanity as a whole is eager to abandon the very planet that sustains us and forms the basis of our shared reality.
This desire to leave the mother of all living things, it signals a kind of breakdown in our relationship with reality itself.
And this alienation, it's not happening in a vacuum. Arendt sees it as part of a dangerous convergence of two modern trends. And this is really the heart of her diagnosis of our predicament.
Okay, what are those two trends?
On the one hand, you have these modern automated mass consumption societies. Their entire structure is built on efficiency, production, and this relentless cycle of consuming things.
And these societies, they function best when they treat people not as unique political individuals, but
as an animal species governed by natural laws, we get reduced to our biological processes. We're just cogs in this giant machine of life maintenance.
So we're encouraged to see ourselves as as animal laborans, the laboring animal, purely biological creatures just driven by needs. But here's the frightening contradiction she points out.
Exactly. The other trend is that these very same human animals, who are now sort of philosophically simplified and, as she says, unconscious of their full capacities and responsibilities, have at the same time acquired Earth-threatening powers.
So we have nuclear weapons, we have genetic engineering, we can even extrapolate to things like AI and the drive to colonize other planets.
Yes, we're wielding world-altering technology while at the same time acting with the philosophical thoughtlessness of someone who's just worried about their next meal or, their next piece of entertainment.
Right.
We have the power to unmake the world, but we lack the political or intellectual framework to responsibly govern that power.
So the real danger is this combination of incredible material power and a kind of profound intellectual irresponsibility. It forces you to ask, are we actually ready for the power we've created?
And Arendt's answer is, well, no. She suggests that what we call the modern age, from the 17th century to the early 20th, is actually over. It was replaced in the mid-20th century by a new and yet unknown age that's defined by this overwhelming technology.
So the very sciences that gave us this ever-quickening increase in human knowledge and power are also, for her, responsible for the demonstrable increase in human despair, that modern nihilism she talks about.
It's a crisis of meaning that goes hand in hand with a crisis of power.
And for a listener today, grappling with headlines about climate change or the billionaire space race, how does Arndt's specific fear of escape from the Earth feel now?
Oh, it translates perfectly. It's the whole techno-utopian narrative you hear from some corners of Silicon Valley. They frame space colonization or creating virtual realities as necessary escape routes from Earth's problems.
So it's not exploration for the sake of curiosity.
It's alienation. It's driven by an urge to relinquish responsibility for the world we actually inhabit. They're fulfilling that Sputnik-era desire. Relief from imprisonment on Earth, often paired with this belief that technology, and only technology, can solve human problems. It completely sidelines the need for politics and for thought.
And that distinction is so important to her. She's not offering a blueprint here.
Not at all. She states very clearly that her book is a reconsideration of the human condition from the vantage point of our newest experiences and our most recent fears. It's an act of thinking against what she calls the thoughtlessness of our time, this complacent repetition of trivial ideas that stops us from really grappling with the scale of the changes we've unleashed.
We have to stop and think about the reality we are creating. And that means going back to first principles. Which brings us to her core framework, the vita activa. Okay, so to structure this whole reconsideration, Arendt introduces this concept, the vita activa. It's a Latin term, and it refers to the life of public engagement as opposed to the vita contemplativa, the contemplative life.
Right, but she doesn't just leave it there. She breaks the active life down into 3 distinct fundamental activities, and each one corresponds to a basic condition of being alive on Earth.
These are labor, work, and action. Why is it so vital for her that we separate these 3? Why does that distinction matter so much?
It matters because they correspond to the 3 dimensions of human existence: survival, stability, and society. Labor is tied to the condition of life itself. Work is tied to the condition of worldliness. And action is tied to the condition of plurality. And her whole argument is that modernity has just fatally collapsed these distinctions, and that's the source of our confusion.
Okay, let's start with labor. This is the one tied to the biological process of the body. Growth, metabolism, decay. The human condition of labor is simply life itself.
Exactly. Labor is bound to what she calls the vital necessities. It produces things that are meant to be immediately consumed, to be fed right back into the life process.
So like a farmer harvesting food or a baker making bread?
Or even just routine cleaning. These are things that are never ending because life itself is a cycle that requires constant repetitive maintenance. If you stop laboring, you die. It's that simple. And the archetype for this is the animal laborans, the laboring animal.
And you say the animal laborans is inherently worldless. What does that mean?
It means it concentrates exclusively on life and its maintenance. It's driven by the needs of its body. And it's interesting, there's a lot of historical baggage here. The words for labor in so many languages.
Like the Latin labor or the Greek ponos.
And the French travail, the German Arbeit. They all signify pain or toil or effort. The French word travailler actually comes from the Latin trapalium, which was an instrument of torture.
Wow, so that etymology really highlights that labor, historically, was seen as a kind of curse. It's a form of servitude imposed on us by our own biology.
Precisely. The only blessing in labor is that immediate feedback loop of effort and gratification. You work, you eat, the need is met, but only for a little while. It's an activity that, by definition, leaves nothing permanent behind. It's futile, in a way, because its product vanishes almost as soon as it's made.
Okay, so that's labor. Let's move to work. You said this is the activity that responds to the unnaturalness of human existence. What do you mean by unnaturalness?
She means that we're mortal. And our individual mortality isn't really compensated for by just knowing the species will go on. We crave something more enduring than just the life cycle.
So work is what creates that enduring thing.
Yes, work is the activity that creates the artificial world of things. This is the durable, stable human artifice. Our tables, chairs, houses, city walls, books, monuments. This world of objects is totally distinct from the natural world, and crucially, it's meant to outlast us. It's meant to transcend our individual lives and provide a stable setting for human memory and history.
And the archetype for this one is the homo faber, the builder, the fabricator, the craftsperson.
Exactly. The condition of work is worldliness. Homo faber is all about permanence, durability, utility. He's creating a stable, shared reality. Tools and instruments are the perfect example of worldly objects. They survive a consumption cycle and allow the human world to persist.
Okay, so we have labor for life, work for the world. And finally, action. You said this is the highest, most political activity for Arendt.
It is, because action is the only activity that happens directly between people, without things or biology getting in the way. And it corresponds to the human condition of plurality.
Plurality, the fact that, as she says, men, not man, live on the earth.
And that fact is the absolute precondition for all political life. Action, for her, is essentially the power of beginning something new, of engaging with other people. It's inseparable from speech, because it's through our actions and our words that we disclose our unique identity. We answer the question, who are you, to the world. We distinguish ourselves as unique beings among a multitude of equals.
She points out that the Roman expression for to live wasn't just about breathing.
No, it was to be among men, inter hominis esse. A life that's spent without public speech and action, a life where you never disclose who you are, is, for her, literally dead to the world. You've renounced the public sphere where your identity can be confirmed and recognized.
So if I'm getting this right, labor is about life maintenance, work is about world maintenance, but action is about founding and preserving the political community itself.
You've got it. And the great danger she sees is that in our modern world, the biological urgency of labor has completely swamped the durability of work, and both have just shoved action completely off the stage. We're trying to manage our political realm like a giant housekeeping operation, not as a space for freedom and spontaneity.
That confusion you're talking about, that leads us right into her analysis of the public sphere and her big critique of modern society. And she starts by looking back, way back to the ancient Greeks.
She does. She looks at the definitive political division for the ancients. This strict, uncrossable gulf between the polis, the city, and the oikia, the household.
And for a Greek citizen, this wasn't just about where you lived. It was a deep philosophical division. The household, the oikia, was the sphere of necessity, of darkness even. It was all about the maintenance of like food, shelter, survival, procreation.
And crucially, the household was defined by inequality and rule. It was the sphere of the despotic one-man rule of the head of the household over his slaves, his family, his dependents. You were subject there to the iron law of biological necessity, and you needed a ruler to master those necessities.
But the polis, the political community, was the absolute opposite. It was the sphere of freedom, of light. To be free, for a Greek, meant to be free from the necessities of life.
Exactly. To even participate in the polis, a citizen had to have already mastered that necessary realm, usually by having slaves and women take care of it in the private household. That freed him up to live a life without being ruled, at least among his equals.
So any kind of merely social get-together based on need, like just huddling together for warmth or safety?
That was seen as a limitation. That's something humans share with animal life. It wasn't considered fundamentally human in the political sense. The public life was reserved for distinction, for glory, for unique, unforgettable actions.
And this is where the huge, seismic shift of modernity happens. She calls it the emergence of the social realm.
And what that means is that all the activities and concerns of that private, necessary household, they basically escape from the shadows and become the defining feature of the public sphere.
It's an essentially modern phenomenon, she says. That old, clear division just vanishes. Housekeeping, economic activities, Things that were once completely private matters of survival.
Are transformed into a collective concern.
We start to see society as this gigantic nationwide administration of housekeeping. Arendt has this amazing phrase for it: a collective of families economically organized into the facsimile of one superhuman family.
It's collective housekeeping. The entire public realm becomes dedicated to managing the life process of the nation, instead of being a space for freedom and action.
And the science that goes with this shift is no longer political science, which focuses on great deeds. It's national economy or social economy.
If you would use the phrase political economy in ancient Greece, it would have been a complete contradiction in terms. Politics was, by definition, about everything except the economy of survival. But today, our political realm is completely dominated by economics, optimizing production, distribution, consumption. That's what politics has become.
This has also totally changed what we even mean by privacy. For the Greeks, to be consumed by the privacy of one's own, the idion was considered idiotic.
Right, because it meant you were cut off from the common shared world where reality happens. But in the modern world, that idion has become intimacy. It's this sheltered sphere of personal feelings and relationships that we cherish.
And we cherish it because the public sphere, which she calls the social, has become so standardized and conformist.
Exactly. Arendt's critique of the social realm isn't just about big government. It's about the quality of human life. The rise of mass society, which needs statistical uniformity to be managed efficiently, means that behavior replaces action.
What's the difference?
Action is unique, spontaneous, unpredictable. Behavior is predictable, average, and conforms to norms. The social realm operates on the iron grip of conforming to statistical averages. It equalizes everything.
So distinction, difference, the very things that fueled ancient political life.
They become purely private matters. That fierce competitive spirit of the ancient polis, where men were always striving to outdo each other with unique deeds, has been replaced by the quiet, efficient management of mass processes and generalized behaviors.
So it's the unstoppable growth of this social realm and how it just devours the older spheres of the political and the private that Arendt sees as the key feature of our age. The life process itself, once banished to the darkness of the home, is now the central business of the state.
Which sets the stage perfectly for the total triumph of the animal laborans.
Let's dig deeper into that then. The problem of labor and what happens when the animal laborans becomes the ideal for an entire society. You said labor is defined by being cyclical and worldless.
That worldlessness is the key. The products of labor, the things we need to survive, don't stick around long enough to become part of the durable, shared human world. They can't, because they are made to be consumed instantly.
They're products of the body's metabolism with nature. Food, fuel, services. They vanish almost immediately. They keep us alive, but they don't stabilize our world.
And historically, this worldlessness is what justified slavery. Before the modern age, slavery was seen as the social solution to the problem of laboring. The ceaseless, repetitive work of staying alive was seen as a burden, a kind of servitude imposed by nature.
Right, that sentiment you mentioned, omnis vita servitium est, all life is servitude.
Exactly. And slavery was the political tool to master that necessity, to free a few citizens from those biological demands so they could go and do other things, like engage in non-necessary, distinctive political action.
But the modern age, and especially thinkers like Karl Marx, completely flipped that perception of labor.
They did. Marx had this revolutionary insight that laboring activity itself has a kind of productivity of its own. It generates what he called Arbeitskraft, or labor power, a surplus that can sustain the lives of many people, not just the individual worker.
And his whole philosophy is centered on liberating that productive force.
Yes, his ideal was a socialized mankind, a mass society of laborers whose only purpose is to maintain and entertain the life process through the scientific management of all our needs. In that kind of utopia, the difference between labor and work would just disappear. Everything would just be a consumable product of living labor power. The goal wasn't just to free the worker, but to fully unleash the productivity of the life process itself.
But when Arendt looks at the world that came after Marx, she sees a massive danger sign. And that's the extent to which our modern economy has become a waste economy.
100%. The modern economy is geared for constant growth, and it absolutely cannot tolerate permanence or durability. For the cycle of production and consumption to keep accelerating and not just grind to a halt, things have to be devoured and discarded as quickly as possible.
So the life process, which is now the main business of the public social realm, demands this ever faster metabolism.
And that dynamic is in direct conflict with the ideals of Homo faber, the world builder. You see it
Yeah.
everywhere today. Planned obsolescence, fast fashion, disposable phones. We are literally forced to treat things that ought to be durable, our homes, our furniture, our cars, as if they were just natural produce that will spoil if we don't consume it fast enough.
So the victory of the animal laborans has basically transformed the durable world of things into mere consumables.
It has. And that's a fundamental threat to the stability of the world. The things that are supposed to provide a lasting common home for us, the things that both relate and separate us, are now just being sucked into the transient, cyclical flow of life itself. The animal laborans is, by its very nature, completely oblivious to the need for a durable world.
This makes me think about so much of modern employment, too. The gig economy, for example. So many of those jobs are about maximizing routine, repeatable tasks. That's labor, while stripping away the permanence and benefits we used to associate with work.
It's a perfect example. It makes the worker more fungible, more like a resource in the metabolism of a corporation, rather than a fabricator building something lasting or a unique agent acting in the world. And that just accelerates the waste economy even further. The core conflict is that our shared world needs permanence, but our economy needs the constant destruction of permanence in order to grow.
And speaking of survival and content.
Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy this podcast.
Right. But that tension, that's what makes her analysis so sharp. The tension between permanence and consumption. But the Homo faber, the worker who wants to build durable things, he also created a lot of problems when his way of thinking, his model of making, was applied to politics. And we need to look at that next.
Okay, let's shift back to work, the activity of the Homo faber. Fabrication creates the human artifice, this durable world of things that outlasts us. And this whole activity is governed by principles of utility and means-end calculations. You have a goal, and you figure out the best way to make it.
But Arendt identifies this really dangerous tradition in Western thought, and she traces it all the way back to Plato. And it's the idea of handling politics, which is the realm of spontaneous action in the mode of fabrication, as if you could make a state.
And this is so crucial. It's taking the principles that are perfect for building a house utility, stability, following a blueprint, and applying them to governing free and unpredictable human beings.
Why did Plato want to do that?
Because he wanted to substitute making for acting precisely to get rid of all the risk, the spontaneity, the messiness that comes with action among equals. He was searching for absolute stability in human affairs. The philosopher king, in his vision, doesn't just act with citizens. He makes his city, like a sculptor makes a statue, following a perfect pre-existing idea.
And that very concept of the idea, the visible form or shape that Plato introduces into philosophy, she says it comes directly from the craftsman's experience.
It does. A craftsman sees the model, the eidos, in his mind's eye before the thing exists. And that means that in any act of fabrication, there's a fundamental split between knowing and doing. First, you conceive the perfect form, then you organize the tools and materials, and finally you execute the plan.
And this fabrication model had a huge impact on all of Western political thought.
A profound impact. Because it established the principle of rule based on knowledge. The one who knows, the philosopher king who has seen the perfect idea, gets to command. And the ones who just do, the citizens, the executors, they have to obey. This identification of ruling with knowing became the foundation for almost every theory of domination that came after. It completely replaced the original idea of action as a spontaneous beginning among free equals.
So the search for stability and certainty, which is great if you're building a bridge, becomes tyrannical when you apply it to the political realm, because politics is, by its nature, unpredictable and founded on the spontaneous actions of unique people.
And the world of Homo faber is also defined by two mental processes that Arendt is very careful to separate: thought and cognition. And this distinction really helps explain the crisis of meaning we find ourselves in.
Let's break that down, because we tend to use those words as if they mean the same thing. What is cognition for her?
Cognition, which for her includes modern science, is a process that pursues a definite aim. It has a clear beginning and end, and it produces measurable results. Knowledge, which can then be added to the human artifice. It is tied completely to usefulness and utility. Scientific knowledge, in this sense, is basically a tool to master the world and get predictable results.
It's the kind of research that gets funded today because it has a clear, practical application.
Exactly. But in stark contrast, Arendt defines thought, true, philosophical, or artistic contemplation as having neither an end nor an aim outside itself. It is by its nature useless in that utilitarian sense. It doesn't produce measurable results or stable knowledge.
So what does it do?
Thought is relentless. It's repetitive. It just coincides with being human, constantly questioning and reflecting without ever reaching a final conclusion. It can inspire the highest forms of worldly creation, like great works of art, but the pure act of thinking itself is useless. The thinker has to actually stop thinking and engage in the material work of fabrication to produce a philosophical system or a poem that other people can share.
And this distinction is so important for understanding why she talks about our thoughtlessness. Our modern society, driven by the values of homo faber and animal laborans, it prioritizes results. So only cognition utility-driven science is really valued.
And pure thought, aimless philosophical questioning gets more and more marginalized because it just doesn't fit into that means-end, results-oriented paradigm.
And she says this utilitarian focus is proven by the big shift in modern science itself. We stopped asking what or why things are,
Questions of being.
and we started asking how they came into being, questions of process.
And that shift comes directly from the conviction that a person can only truly know what they themselves have made. Descartes argued we can only be absolutely certain about mathematics because we constructed that world of relations ourselves.
And the scientific experiment, the core method of modern science, is basically an act of making.
It is. It repeats a natural process, as if a human being were manufacturing nature's objects. This blending of making and knowing means the object of science is no longer some eternal nature, but the process of nature, or the process of life. And this elevates the scientist to the role of a maker, giving him control and certainty, but it also reduces the vast mystery of nature to just a series of manageable processes.
It seems like she's arguing that by demanding certainty and utility in everything, from our politics to our physics, we've inadvertently destroyed the conditions for the most human things we do: spontaneous action and useless thought.
So while work is all about creating permanence through fabrication, action is the exact opposite. It's defined by its inherent fragility, its spontaneity, and most of all, its total unpredictability.
And action and speech, which are how we show the world who we are, they absolutely require the presence of others. They require plurality.
You can never act in isolation. To be isolated, for Arendt, is to be deprived of your capacity to act. If I just lift a heavy rock by myself, that's an exertion of strength. It's not action. Action begins when I say or do something new among other people.
And the fundamental challenge of action is what she calls its startling unexpectedness and its boundlessness.
Right. Any action sets off new processes that go way beyond what the actor could ever control or predict. And that's why frailty and uncertainty are just the decisive character of all human affairs. The new always shows up looking like a miracle, because you simply could not have predicted it from what came before.
And she says this unpredictability comes from two places. First, the darkness of the human heart, the fact that we're just unreliable. We can't even guarantee who we will be tomorrow.
And second, the sheer impossibility of knowing what the consequences of an act will be when it's thrown into a community where everyone else can also act spontaneously. Every action you take immediately gets woven into this huge, pre-existing web of relationships, and that creates infinite, unforeseen ripple effects.
This brings us to her really deep analysis of power. She makes a critical distinction here. Power dynamis, or potentia, is not the same as individual strength, and it's definitely not the same as force or violence.
No. Power, for Arendt, springs up between people when they act and speak together. It only exists when people are assembled.
And it vanishes the second they disperse. The city-state, the polis, is the perfect model for this, because the only thing you absolutely need to generate power is the living together of people. Isolation is the immediate loss of power.
This means power is always relational. It's never something an individual can possess. It's this miraculous enlargement of what human activity can achieve together.
Violence, on the other hand, is instrumental. It's a tool.
Right. And it can be very effective at destroying things. Violence can destroy power, strength, life itself, but it can never, ever generate power. The political combination of massive force and total powerlessness is what defines tyranny.
Explain that. How can a tyrant with an army be powerless?
Because a tyrant relies on isolating his subjects. He prevents them from acting and speaking together, and that stops them from generating any communal power that could challenge him. He might wield incredible force, but he is fundamentally powerless because he stands alone. He can't rely on the shared judgment and agreement of others.
So in a tyranny, everyone, the ruler and the ruled, is condemned to futility because real political action is impossible.
Exactly. And the only alternative to that kind of domination is a freedom that accepts non-sovereignty. the recognition that no single person can ever be the sovereign master of their own actions and their consequences.
So given this incredible fragility, actions are irreversible in the past and unpredictable in the future, human affairs need some kind of remedy.
And Arendt identifies two unique human capacities that allow us to live politically despite these huge risks.
The first one is forgiveness, and this is the remedy for the irreversibility of the past. Once you've done something, you can't undo it.
But forgiving, she says, is the only reaction that is itself a new and unexpected action. It breaks the destructive chain of consequences that an action sets off. It serves to undo the deeds of the past, whose sins hang like Damocles' sword over every new generation.
Forgiveness is what frees us from vengeance, which is just this automatic, endless cycle of reaction.
And forgiving is an eminently personal thing. You do it for the sake of the who, the person, not the what, the deed itself. It's this ability to mutually release each other from the consequences of what we've done.
Okay, so that's for the past. What about the future?
The second remedy is promise-making, and this is what counteracts the chaotic uncertainty of the future. Since we can't rely on people to be consistent, we have to voluntarily bind ourselves. Making a promise sets up what she calls islands of security in this ocean of uncertainty.
So contracts, treaties, constitutions.
They're all a form of promise-making. They're instruments we design to stabilize our relationships and create some shared reliability in a world where we are all fundamentally unreliable and spontaneous. Forgiveness frees us from the past, and promises stabilize our path into the future.
Which leads to her final, almost tragic point about the price of freedom.
It is a bit tragic. Man's inability to rely on himself, his own spontaneity, that is the price we pay for freedom. And the impossibility of ever being the sole sovereign master of your own deeds and their consequences. That's the price we pay for plurality, for the joy of sharing a world with other people. Without forgiveness and promise-making, we'd be hopelessly trapped, and that would just force us back toward the tyranny of a single controlling will.
That was an incredible journey through her framework. So to wrap this up, what does this all mean for us today? What are the really crucial takeaways from this deep dive into the human condition?
Well, firstly, Arendt's central call is more urgent than ever. We absolutely must think what we are doing. We are operating in a world that has been completely transformed by science and technology, and we're looking at ourselves through the lens of our immense power and our newest fears. We are, in short, a very powerful but philosophically thoughtless species.
Secondly, her redefinition of the vita activa. We have to hold on to those essential distinctions between labor, the biological cycle of necessity and consumption, the world of the animal laborans, work, the making of a durable, stable world by the Homo faber, and action, the unpredictable political activity of freedom among equals.
Thirdly, the core modern dilemma is the rise of the social. This is the phenomenon that has completely blurred the ancient line between the free polis and the necessary household. And the result is a mass society that is totally preoccupied with collective housekeeping, statistical management, and the demands of a cyclical waste economy.
And finally, against the existential frailty of action, its irreversibility, and its unpredictability, she gives us the uniquely human capacities for forgiveness, to undo the chains of the past, and promise-making, to secure a common future. These are the only real alternatives to tyranny and endless cycles of vengeance.
And that leaves us with Arendt's final provocative thought. It's one that really echoes today, with the rise of algorithmic governance and purely utility-based politics. The modern age, in its obsessive hunt for stability and certainty, substituted making fabrication and utility for acting spontaneity and plurality in the political realm. We're just driven by the search for measurable results.
And so the question she leaves us with is a profound one. Can the human capacity for thought, which she defined as being inherently useless because it's aimless and produces no external product, can that capacity even survive in a social world that is increasingly hostile to anything that doesn't produce a measurable outcome, accelerate the life process, or fit neatly into the machinery of calculated necessity?
The vulnerability of pure, useless thought under the relentless pressure of utility. That might be the highest price we're paying for our collective focus on consumption and certainty. It's a critical thought to carry forward as you look at the priorities and demands of the world you inhabit.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you feel a little better informed about the nature of our condition now. We'll catch you on the next one.